Hey y'all, this is my biggest project yet, building an entertainment center for my wife's office. All of the cabinet projects we've done this year have really been leading up to this, practicing how to work with the plywood and coming up with what I think is the best way to construct one of these. The project is essentially 4 phases. First is building the base cabinets, second is building the countertop, third is building the upper cabinets, and then the fourth is finishing out with the trim and doors. To start the first phase, after cutting the boards down to size, I cut rabbets into the side boards where the top and bottom boards go. I did that on the table saw by making multiple passes and then cleaning it up with a hand plane. The reason I went with this method was for ease of assembly. No guessing as to if the boards are in the right place or not when you connect them. You just glue and slide them into their slots, then brad nail them in place. Since these are load bearing, I thought it'd also be important for the cross pieces to be inset into the sideboard some, rather than just being held on with the glue and the brad nails, to help transfer the load as well. After building 2 identical side pieces, I needed to create the middle cabinet. This cabinet will be open facing with a long shelf in the middle. This is where the consoles and other electronics are going to be stored. After doing the initial build though, I quickly realized one of my rabbets was off, so I had to take it apart real quick, cut in a new rabbet and add a piece of filler, and then reassemble it. Luckily, this is all going to be painted in the end, so it will be hidden in the final product. Now to make the face frames. One of the unexpected benefits of this mini workbench's plane stop is that it really does help when I need a straight edge for glue ups or in this case pocket holes. I built the outer frame for the cabinet with pocket holes because this will really be front and center for wear and tear on the finished product, and I really want to make sure these don't ever get deformed or put out of shape. After gluing and brad nailing the 2 sides, I then added a backer by gluing and screwing a 1/4-inch plywood onto the back of the cabinets. No need for fancy insets since this will be hidden up against the wall. I cut out and attached a bottom support to help with sag, and then fit a middle support between the bottom and middle shelves, leaving some room in the back for cables and anything else that may need to go between these 2 bottom compartments once the back is put on. I then glued and brad nailed on the backing. I then built the outer face frame using the same technique as the other 2, but I freehanded the 2 inner frames, so I wanted to make sure these were perfectly symmetrical with the middle shelf and that middle support piece. After that, all the nail holes were puttied and the entire cabinet was sanded, and then time for paint. The center console is going to be open faced, so the entire cabinet got a coat of blue paint as well as primer. The side cabinets are going to have doors, so the outside was painted, but the inside was covered in several coats of a water-based poly to help build up protection. I also drilled out a whole set of adjustable shelf holes so that those can be added later. The last step was to cut the holes in the back of the cabinet where the outlets were going to be. I was really worried about these lining up, so I made sure in the design I'm only putting these in the 2 side cabinets where they won't be readily visible. After test fitting, the bottom brace was a little proud, and my side panel was a little too far out from the cabinet, so I tackled both with some delicate planing to get a perfect fit. At this point, I have the cabinets in with the outlets installed. You can see that this cabinet's going to have power and internet run to it, and then this is where also the cables are coming in from the TV up above. Later, we'll add a pass-through from this cabinet into the center cabinet for the cables to reach the electronics area. The other side has just an outlet, but at this point, we're going to go ahead and attach all 3 cabinets together by pre-drilling and then countersinking holes in the face frames. Driving the screws flush will make it so they'll disappear once we add some paint to the heads of them to match the frame. I made a separate video on building the countertop here that is phase 2. It's a glue up of cherry boards with a light stain and more water-based poly. You can check out the link to that video in the description. Now to phase 3, building the upper cabinets. For these cabinets, I went with a little simpler construction method as they're not load-bearing and they're a little easier to maneuver, being only 12 or 8 inches deep. After cutting the boards down to size, I attached the top of the boards with pocket holes from the top where they'll never be seen, and then attached the middle supports with glue and brad nails. I then also added a base support to the back of the lower cabinet, also with glue and brad nails. This middle and lower support really are just there to keep the side straight and the cabinet square, and to give us some place to mount this in position. After adding a plywood backer to the side cabinet, I also drilled pocket holes at the base, which we'll be using later to also keep the cabinet square. Less worried about the wear and tear on these, more worried about getting this plywood straightened up. I did this trim one piece at a time. And then after building 2 side cabinets that were 12 inches deep and 1 middle cabinet that was 8 inches deep, all 3 of them got a ton of adjustable shelf holes added to them. And then all 3 were ready for paint. To install, the 2 side cabinets were pretty easy. They just sit on top of the countertop. The centerpiece, on the other hand, was highly debated in my head how to do this. I thought about doing a French cleat to hold it up, but it's not a very deep cabinet already and had to be a specific depth to it. And I really wasn't confident in my ability to really get it lined up properly in place on this wall. So instead, I attached a 2x4 to the wall with these lag bolt replacement screws, and then set the cabinet on top of that. I then screwed the cabinet into the 2x4 to hold the bulk of the weight, and then into the side cabinets and into the wall to help keep it in place. To build out the rest of the middle section, I added 2x4s to the bottom, and then a set of 2x4s in the middle where we're going to mount the TV. After that, I added shiplap that we found at the big box store to this intersection. Once I got to the area where the outlets were, I had to cut 2 holes for the box extenders before finishing it out. Now to attach the 2 side towers to the structure, I put a spacer block in to get the right width, then drilled through the pocket holes into the countertop to lock it in place. With that complete, on to phase 4. I needed to add a small block up top, and then I started attaching crown molding. I strangely enjoyed this part, but I'm very glad we're painting it a dark color to hide all the imperfections. As you can see me put on the rest of this trim to match the other throughout the house, this is where I realized I really should have painted this before installing it. Painting all this trim was probably the worst part of this process, super tedious. With all the paint done, we installed the TV into those 2x4s that we lag screwed into the studs. Now to build the shelves. I used 3/4 inch plywood with faceboards attached to get a lot of rigidity into these. I then painted and got them installed. Last but not least is the doors for the 2 side cabinets. I cut out mortises in all the pieces by running the boards through the table saw in each direction to make sure the mortise was in the middle of the board. Then cut out the overlaps on just the top pieces to make the sections that will insert into the sides to hold all these boards together. Gluing in just the corners where the boards meet, not where the panel's going to be, I then assembled the doors. I then prepped the hardware locations using this simple jig, sanded and painted them. Then installed the hardware to get them ready to be mounted. After pre-drilling the approximate holes, since these mounts have some play in them, I got the doors attached, then determined the final position using spacer blocks. And just like that, it's full. We have the cables running from the TV to the center console through the left side cabinet. The wires are all hidden. The books and trinkets look great on display. That wraps up this build. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and we will see you on the next one. Thanks.